I'm Laura, I'm 41, and 3 years ago my sister Valentina told me our parents had chosen to move to a luxury nursing home. It's the best for them, she said. They have 24-hour care, friends, activities. I was living abroad working, sending money monthly to help with their expenses. Until I lost my job and had to return. I went to the nursing home. It wasn't luxury. It was a hell with yellow walls. My father, 78 with Parkinson's, was tied to a chair, bruised without medication. My mother, 76 with dementia, was eating from a plate on the floor because that way she doesn't make a mess. I asked what she was eating. Meat, she said, smiling. Canned meat. It wasn't meat, it was dog food. Valentina bought dog food in bulk, canned it herself, and sold it as nutritious homemade food to low-cost nursing homes. To our parents. To other elderly people. To hundreds of people. With the money I sent. With the money from selling our parents' house. With their pension money. And when I confronted Valentina at her house, our parents' house, now hers, with the police, with the press, with the elderly people I rescued, she smiled. They were worthless, Laura, you too, you just sent money to feel good. I did the real work, I got them out of my way. I didn't respond. I showed her the last document, our parents' will, which Valentina couldn't forge because our father had written it in the nursing home, with trembling handwriting, witnessed by everyone. Everything to Laura, nothing to Valentina because she made us eat dogs. Valentina laughed, until I read the final clause. And if Laura doesn't claim it, everything goes to the Elderly Protection Foundation she will create. Valentina was left without a house, without money, without parents. But the worst, without the illusion that she had fooled us all. Because my father, tied up, drugged, eating dogs, knew. He knew everything, and he wrote, and he testified, and he waited. He waited 18 months, for me to return, for me to read it. For her to know that he knew. I grew up in a family that valued appearances over substance. My father, Roberto, was an accountant who had built a modest career on precision and patience, who had married my mother Alina for her laughter, who had raised 2 daughters with the expectation that we would be decent, that we would be kind, that we would care for each other when they could no longer care for themselves. My sister Valentina was the beautiful one, the charming one, the one who could make anyone believe anything, who could sell ice to the Arctic, who had turned her talent for persuasion into a career in senior care management. She managed nursing homes, she said. She helped families navigate difficult decisions, she said. She was successful, she said, and the evidence supported her. The house she lived in, the car she drove, the clothes she wore, the confidence she projected. I was the practical one. The one who studied social work, who moved to Spain to work in legitimate nursing homes, who spent 10 years caring for elderly people with dignity and respect. I sent money home, $800 monthly, because Valentina said our parents needed it. Because I was far away, because I trusted my sister to manage what I couldn't manage myself. Valentina told me about the nursing home 3 years ago. Casa Serenidad, she called it. A luxury facility, she said. Our parents had chosen it, she said. They were happy, she said. She sent me photographs. My father in a garden, my mother at a piano, both of them smiling, well-dressed, surrounded by flowers and light. I believed her. I had no reason not to. She was my sister, and she was there, and I was far away, and the photographs were convincing. I lost my job 6 months ago. Budget cuts, restructuring, the kind of corporate language that means nothing to the person who is suddenly without income, without visa, without the life they had built. I returned to my country, to my city, to the family I had left behind, intending to find work, to rebuild, to visit my parents and see for myself what Valentina had been describing. I found Casa Serenidad on a Tuesday. The building was yellow, faded, the paint peeling in strips that revealed older layers of color, a history of neglect that the current coat couldn't conceal. The entrance was narrow, the door unlocked, the reception desk unmanned. I walked in, calling for my parents, for anyone, for the staff that should have been present. The smell hit me first, not the smell of illness, which I knew from my work, but the smell of decay, of unwashed bodies, of urine and feces, and the particular odor of hunger that is different from the odor of poverty. It was the smell of abandonment, of systematic neglect, of cruelty that had been organized and maintained. I found my father in a room with 6 other men. He was tied to a chair, his wrists bound with cloth that had been tightened until it cut into his skin, leaving marks that were infected, that had been untreated for days or weeks. His Parkinson's medication was not being administered, his tremors were constant, his head shaking in a rhythm that was painful to watch, his eyes clouded with confusion and fear, and something that might have been recognition when he saw me. "Laura," he said, his voice rough, barely audible, the voice of a man who had not been allowed to speak, who had been silenced by medication or neglect, or the simple despair of knowing that no one was coming. I untied him. I checked his body, my nursing training automatic, my hands moving through the assessment that revealed bruises, pressure sores, dehydration, malnutrition. He was 78 years old, and he had been treated worse than I would treat an animal, worse than I had treated any patient in my 10 years of professional care. I found my mother in another room, with women who were similarly neglected, similarly abandoned. She was on the floor, eating from a plate that had been placed there, her hands trembling as she scooped food into her mouth, her dementia evident in her vacant smile, her inability to recognize me, her simple acceptance of the position she had been placed in. "Meat," she said when I asked what she was eating. "Canned meat. Valentina brings it, very good." I tasted it. I didn't need to, but I did. Because I needed to know, because the suspicion was already forming, because the smell was wrong, the texture was wrong, the taste was wrong. It was dog food. Processed, canned, labeled as something else, but fundamentally at its core, food intended for animals, not for humans, not for elderly people with dementia who didn't know what they were eating. I vomited. Not from the taste, but from the knowledge, from the understanding of what my sister had done, of what I had participated in with my monthly payments, of the complicity that my distance and my trust had created. I didn't confront Valentina immediately. I rescued. I called the police, the health authorities, the journalists I knew from my time in the country. I moved my parents and 12 other elderly people who could be transported to a hospital, where they were assessed, treated, documented. I collected evidence. The food, the cans with their false labels, the financial records that showed Valentina's company as the supplier, the photographs, the testimonies of staff who had been fired for complaining, of families who had been told their relatives were fine. I investigated. Not as a sister, but as a professional, using the skills I had developed in 10 years of social work, the knowledge of how systems fail, the understanding of how predators operate within legal structures that protect them. Valentina wasn't just feeding dog food to our parents. She was running a network. 5 nursing homes, all with the same model: luxury marketing, brutal reality, bulk purchase of dog food, repackaging as nutritious homemade meals, sale to facilities that cut costs to maximize profit. Hundreds of elderly people. Millions of dollars. My money, sent monthly to help. Our parents' pension diverted. The proceeds from selling their house, which Valentina had managed with documents signed by my mother, who didn't understand what she was signing. But there was more. Valentina had done this before. Other families, other elderly people, other luxury facilities that were hellholes with good photography. She had been investigated, briefly, twice, but had escaped with fines, with promises, with the legal protection that money and connections provide. I found the witnesses. The nurse who had been fired for being demanding, who had documented the bruises, the malnutrition, the dog food. The caregiver who had taken photographs before resigning, who had kept them for 2 years, waiting for someone who would listen. The other elderly people, some still lucid, who could testify to what they had endured, what they had seen, what they had been forced to eat. And I found my father's documents. Hidden in his mattress, wrapped in plastic, protected from the damp and the insects and the neglect. Pages and pages of writing, in trembling handwriting, in moments of lucidity that his Parkinson's medication would have made more frequent if he had been receiving it. He had written everything. The transfer to the facility, the sale of the house, the diversion of pensions, the dog food, the abuse, the neglect. He had written it for me, for Laura, for the daughter who was far away, who sent money, who didn't know, who he hoped would eventually return. He had also written a will, not a formal document, not legally perfect, but clear, witnessed by the nurse and the caregiver and 2 elderly residents who still understood what they were seeing. Everything to Laura, nothing to Valentina, because she made us eat dogs. And the final clause, the one that destroyed Valentina's illusions, that transformed the document from revenge into legacy. And if Laura doesn't claim it, everything goes to the Elderly Protection Foundation she will create. My father had waited. 18 months, tied to chairs, eating dog food, watching his wife deteriorate, knowing that his other daughter was a monster, that his trust had been betrayed, that the only hope was the daughter who didn't know, who was far away, who might never return. He waited. He wrote. He testified. He preserved the evidence that would destroy Valentina's narrative, that would prove that even in his degradation, Even in his drugged and neglected state, he had known. He had understood. He had refused to be the victim that Valentina believed she had created. I confronted Valentina at the house. Our parents' house, which she had sold, which she had kept the proceeds from, which she had transformed into her own property through documents that my mother had signed without understanding. The police were with me. The press was with me. The elderly people I had rescued were with me, some in wheelchairs, some supported by caregivers, all of them witnesses to what Valentina had done. She smiled, the same smile from the photographs, from the phone calls, from the years of lies that had sustained her business and her life. They were worthless, Laura, she said. You too, you just sent money to feel good. I did the real work. I got them out of my way. I didn't respond. I showed her the will, the documents, the witnesses, the photographs, the cans of dog food with their false labels, the financial records that traced her fraud through shell companies and fake suppliers and bank accounts that I had documented with the patience of someone who had learned to wait, who had learned to build cases, who had learned that justice requires evidence more than emotion. She laughed. An old man's scribbles, they mean nothing. He was demented, drugged, tied to a chair. No court will accept this. But the lawyer I had hired, with the last of my savings, with the help of the nurse and the caregiver and the network of professionals who understood what Valentina had done, confirmed what I hoped. The will was valid. The witnesses were credible. The documentation was overwhelming. The photographs, the testimonies, the 18 months of waiting, all of it supported the intention that my father had expressed, the knowledge that he had maintained, the refusal to be erased that he had demonstrated through his writing. Valentina lost everything. The house sold. The proceeds directed to the foundation. Her other facilities closed, investigated, exposed. Her reputation, destroyed by the press coverage that she had always used to build her business, now turned against her. Her freedom, limited by legal proceedings that would continue for years, that would consume her money and her time and her illusions of intelligence. But the worst loss was not material. It was the illusion that she had fooled us all, that her parents were ignorant, that her sister was complicit, that her crimes were perfect, that her victims were without agency or understanding. My father, tied to a chair, drugged, eating dogs, had known. He had written, he had testified, he had waited. And in the waiting, in the writing, in the knowledge that he preserved despite everything, he had denied Valentina the one thing she wanted most. The belief that she was smarter than everyone, that she had won, that her victims were without resources or recourse. I didn't create the foundation immediately. First, I cared for my parents. Roberto died 6 months later, in peace, properly medicated, properly fed, knowing that Valentina knew that he knew. Elena, with her dementia, sometimes smiled without knowing why. I smiled with her, knowing that the smile was real, that it was hers, that it was not the result of dog food or neglect or the systematic destruction of her dignity. The foundation, when I created it, was called Those Who Knew. For elderly people in nursing homes, for monitoring, for surprise inspections, for anonymous reporting. Small but effective. I used my experience from Spain, my pain, my rage, my father's 18 months of waiting, to build something that would prevent what had happened to him from happening to others. Years later, an elderly woman in a facility during one of our inspections said to me, "My daughter sold me. She said it was the best thing." I responded, "It wasn't the best thing. It was the easiest thing for her, but you know, and knowing is power, and we who know have to speak." She nodded, she understood. She was one of those who knew, one of those who had been silenced, one of those who would now be heard because of what my father had written, what I had read, what Valentina had lost when she discovered that her victims were not as ignorant as she believed. If someone told you that your parents were better off in a facility you never visited, if they sent you photographs that hid the truth, if they took your money and used it to destroy the people you loved, hear me. The distance that protects you from seeing also protects them from being seen. The trust that allows you to send money also allows them to steal it. And the only way to know is to go, to see, to touch, to taste, to refuse the performance of care that masks the reality of abandonment. That's my story. If it spoke to you, comment below. If someone sold your parents and called it love, tell me. I'll read every word. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.